Welcome to Three Thoughts On. Today we have Rebecca Roberts. Rebecca, how are you today?
I'm very good. How are you?
I am doing well, having a great day so far. I am very excited about this conversation because it's a bit different than all the other ones I've had already. Um, and I'm really eager to see where this is going to take us and what kind of new things I'm going to learn on this. So, can you take a minute and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how did you arrive at this, doing this that you love so much?
Sure. So, what this is the topic of storytelling. Um, and, I think a lot of times we all have different ideas when we hear certain words, and storytelling is one that conjures up different things for different people. And the way that I look at it is storytelling is this aspect of how we communicate through our personal experiences to build bridges of communication. And how I got into all of this is a bit roundabout, but it's a lovely story. Of my background is in interior architecture and design, and I was always working with workplaces, and I could always find it so interesting doing interviews with different clients and seeing how differently people experience their lives and their workplaces. And so that was one of the first things that always came up, as far as how it could be that somebody has the same boss and the same work environment and the same job title as someone else, but their experiences and outlook on life are totally different. And through time, I did a lot of exploration on mindset work, so cognitive behavioral therapy and coaching explorations and these different aspects. And I started realizing that actually, while mindset is one of my favorite things to play with, I realized that storytelling was a bit of the shortcut to exploring our mindsets, because really, when we look at our identities, when we look at the mindsets and the beliefs that we have, it is all a compilation of our stories and the stories that we tell ourselves about our own lives, about our experiences, and the stories that we tell about the world around us. And so, this is how I've kind of come to this place where I love communication and I love building bridges. But I've been able to now, with my work, marry this together with people understanding their own stories better. So, these two aspects coming together of storytelling and how we communicate out into the world to build bridges of communication, but then story weaving, which is the experience of recognizing that the stories that we're telling inside of our minds before we ever open our mouths are actually what shapes our experience of life.
That's beautiful. There is a school of thought that, and like, of course, it's debatable where this argument or debate will end up, but there are some evolutionary archaeologists and evolutionary biologists that talk about, why did we develop language the way we did versus the rest of creation, if you will. And there are some that believe that we created language, or we evolved into creating a language specifically to tell stories, to
Hmm.
to tell stories about each other, right? So it's more
Absolutely.
like, gossiping, if you will. But
Yes.
it is really embedded in the core of who we are to be able to talk and to tell a story, regardless of what the story is. Whether
Yes.
you do it, verbally, whether you do it through music, whether you do it through some other means, it is embedded in our core to be able to communicate. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about is the fact that I feel that as a society we really don't communicate as we should.
Mm.
And that's why I invited you. I'm so thankful that you accepted to be in my podcast, because I started listening to some of your content. It's like, wow, this is right in the middle of
Mm.
of where I want of my message to be,
Yeah.
to people that listen to this podcast, is we can do better. We can do better talking with each other, talking to ourselves, the stories we tell ourselves to ourselves, and how we communicate with others. So When you say you mentioned something interesting there, you said you know CBT, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy and mindset and stuff. Can you expand a little bit more on the relationship between that and the art, if you will, of telling a
Sure.
story?
Yeah. So actually, this is one of these things that I our mindset, when we can start to recognize and just begin to grasp the tip of the iceberg of how powerful our minds are in controlling and contributing to our life experience, that is where we start to recognize that, there are a lot of cliche sayings out there, and they're cliche for a reason. There's definitely a lot of truth behind it, but you hear a lot of this fake it till you make it, and you hear like mindset is everything and have a positive outlook. But what's behind all of that is actually that our thoughts are shaping our experience of life. And if I walk around with a belief system that I need to fight for everything, right? That life is a battle, then I'm going to walk around with that shade of glasses, and everything will go through that filter. Now, life is so much more dynamic and complex than any one person can actually take in. But the recognition that the lens through which we view everything, which is actually our mindset, is shaping how we are interacting with the world. If somebody comes up to me and is like, "Hey, punk, what's up?" And I've got the idea that I want to fight, my fists will automatically raise up. If I've got the idea that life is playful, I'll be like, "I don't know, what's up with you?" And I can start playing back. And I find it one of these things that it's instantly recognizable because you can play with this in real time, right? If I'm sitting there and I'm recognizing that I'm feeling super down and I think that life is not supporting me, and I can ask myself, okay, so what is one thing right now, if I change that thought and I thought, life is here to support me. Life is supporting life, and I am part of life. And so, okay. And instantly, I look around and I start to see all of the ways that life is supporting itself with the growth of, the sunlight, with the growth of the plants, with all of these different things. And they're very simple things, but so are the simple things that we're struggling with. Um, like, I got into a fight with my partner, or I'm struggling with my boss. All of these different things, when we start to bring it back to our own personal choices, that's where mindset becomes synonymous with like personal responsibility, meaning, and I love this definition of responsibility, the ability to respond. And just recognizing that that can change everything. So our mindset is shaping our identities, which are so much more malleable than we give ourselves credit for. Um, and it's shaping how I view the world. And little tweaks in those stories can have massive impacts on how we're approaching the people and the places and the things around us.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. It's that old saying of the world is not the way it is the way you see it.
Mm,
And I tend to modify that a little bit. I We can get into the eternal debate of free will, but the world is the way I choose to see it,
mhm.
right? And what lens, like you said, what lens I choose to see the world, or what set of lenses. I find myself having multiple lenses through which I see the world,
Yes,
depending on the situation. And each lens comes with a different model and a different mindset.
yes,
And that allows me to then have narratives that are constructive for me in order to be able to carry on and not reacting to the world every time I walk out. Instead,
yes,
being able to observe, assess, be part of, and then carry on, right? And then
mm,
that will then build a story that I can tell myself later on of, how was your day? Well, with the proper set of lenses, that narrative would sound a very specific way. Whereas with a different set of lenses, that narrative was going to sound completely different. And then that
Oh
ends
yeah,
up shaping tomorrow. Right.
absolutely.
So tell me, when we were preparing for the podcast, you said that, you have three thoughts, I guess, on
Yes,
storytelling. Let's start with
yes.
number one.
So number one, we already touched on, and it's to begin to shape our mindsets to have a storyteller mindset. Um, and what that is in this concept of story weaving, right? It's the fact that in each moment, I mean, there are all of these studies that talk about the amount of inputs that come at us in each moment, that there are trillions of bits of information that are coming at our senses. And then our senses have to narrow down and choose just a few things that come in at any moment. Otherwise, we'd be constantly overwhelmed. And what this story weaving implies or touches on is that when we begin to take more control by choice, and I love that you added the choose to, right? Because for me, this is, and it goes into another one of the points that I want to talk about, but when we begin to recognize that I can shape what I focus my attention on, and where, I love all of these different things, like our energy is focused in on that which we give our attention to. So if I want to focus in on how crappy the entire world is and how everything is going to then, I'll have those moments where I'm just sitting there going, I can find infinite evidence to prove this. Infinite evidence. And if I view the world as this wondrous place, which is extraordinary, then I can find infinite evidence to prove this. And so, this storyteller mindset is the capacity to recognize that the world that I am creating with my words, that I'm sharing and bridging out, is first shaped inside of my own mind. And if the stories that I want to tell are of, destruction and woe and separation, then I can find every evidence to back that up. And at the same time, if, like I do, I want to tell stories that are talking about how we can celebrate our differences and how it's actually the diversity that is what makes us so incredible and wonderful as human beings. So, trying to, as much as possible, bring this idea of unification, then the lens that I'm looking through the world is looking for examples of this. And there are as many examples of unification as there are of disunification and disruption. And so it's not about being ignorant to the rest of the world, but it's recognizing that we only have a finite amount of focus and that we have the choice to direct our minds, and the more we become aware of that, the more we can highlight and grow bigger, zoom into those beautiful aspects of life that live around us.